That joke isn't funny anymore. Available on Amazon and everywhere. Hey guys, welcome back to the Lou Perez podcast. I'm your host, Lou Perez, and I am joined today by author and journalist Lisa Selin Davis. Did I get Selin right? Is that how you say it?
Yeah, but also I welcome any interpretation of that.
Where's Selin from? Where's it?
Maybe Ellis Island.
Oh, so there was like a lot of consonants following the N, and they were just like, "Screw this."
And some Eastern European ending to that name at some point.
Yeah, for those of you who are not watching this, who don't have video, behind Lisa on the wall it's like all of her books she's written, and she's written a lot, novels. She's written nonfiction. I feel like you're kind of just mocking me for just having one book. That guy right over there.
I'll buy it because I have 4 worst sellers.
Well, I every single day since my book came out, I check its rankings on Amazon. I check, I pop in and be like, oh, where's the paperback and where's the audiobook version? And I tell you what, I mean, I'm consistently like top million on Amazon, which is
pretty good, right?
Yeah, I think so, right?
How many books are on there?
Oh, I mean,
millions and millions.
Yeah, and I mean, you think about, was it that Great Fire that, what was it, like how many thousands of years ago, where all those books, what was it, Alexander the Great? There was a big fire that just destroyed a library. So thank God, otherwise I'd be even lower ranked.
My hippie education just came through, so I'm like, I don't know. It's like European history.
Yeah. Well, so you're
neo-Marxist theory.
What was that?
I said I took neo-Marxist theory, but I don't remember that anyway. So
nice. Where'd you go to school?
Where'd I go to college?
Yeah.
I went to Hampshire College, where my mom was a librarian, and the price tag was $0.
Nice.
And no matter what class you signed up for, it was neo-Marxist interpretations of women in the media. Even if it was like a biology class, that's what you did in there.
And
it was really helpful for getting a job. Yeah, later.
When you were in it, were you when you were in school, not trying to get a job, were you into it? You're like, oh, this is fantastic. Like, thank God I'm learning this. Like, thank God this new knowledge is coming my way.
I think it was a continuation of all the knowledge I'd been acquiring in Amherst High School, which, by the way, the junior high, well, now it's called middle school, was just, I didn't read the story, but there was a big story about like wokeness and contention in the junior high. And I'm old, so we didn't have that problem. But I really didn't think to question anything about the various zeitgeists under which I was raised, until a few years ago. So that all seemed like a perfectly reasonable way to engage with and interpret the world through these ideas and through a feminist lens. And when I wanted to shave my armpits to fit in, my parents would talk to me about, women remove their body hair so that they look prepubescent, so men can control them. And, there was a lot of that. So that's how I was walking around in the world until very recently.
That this is the first time that I'm hearing about like that explanation for it, removing body hair. I'm 42 and I grew up, I guess, I graduated high school in 2000, and I was at the time where like the thong song came out. Like that was I think it's Cisco. That was very, very popular. And then also, I guess, as far as grooming went, in addition to, no armpit hair.
Oh, the Brazilian.
Yeah. It was just, either all gone, or whatnot. So, I don't know how old I was when I guess I first met a woman in in natural, like the way she was,
Oh.
the way nature intended it.
Oh, you mean you only saw shaved pubic areas?
For a while, now that I'm thinking about it, I think my first experience, I think she had everything there, but then but then quickly she kind of went with the fad, and then just started like getting rid of it. So there was a while, yeah. And I had one girlfriend. I asked her, like, hey, could you keep some of it, just a little bit?
Yeah, so it doesn't look like I'm having sex with a child.
Yeah.
I mean, I think there's something to that lens, and I think trying to dominate your natural body is a great way, and make women and now men, equal opportunity, feel ashamed about just being human. Like I'm always saying to my kids, your armpits smell like humans, and actually it's fine. And in some cultures that's fine, but because you're out in the world, you might want to put this stuff on that makes you smell like a flower, but actually you're just trying not to smell human. And but we live in the world. But where I grew up, there was plenty of women didn't shave their legs or armpits. And I actually appreciate that last gasp of hippiness. I think it was pretty good. Like I think expanding, or at least I used to think that having a wider range of normal was a really good thing, because the narrower the range of normal, the more you control people, the more you censure people for going outside that range. And I was up for there are a lot of ways to be in the world. And I think we in the past few years, we've made the abnormal into normal and the normal into abnormal and upended everything. And I don't like it anymore.
Yeah.
But I still don't want the little narrow range of normal. Like, I guess shave your armpits if you want to, but I still think it's weird.
Yeah. And I think something else has happened too, where, where everything is accepted. There's also like, okay, if we want everything, you want to accept everything. All right, fine. I guess we're going to live that way. But then they also want it to be kind of applauded, where it's like every like, say, quote unquote abnormal thing. Like, not only do I have to accept it, but I also have to like give you a trophy and say how amazing it is that you're doing this. And I think that's probably that's a pretty big issue, I think.
Yeah, I feel like I did not get my asexual trophy this year, and there's a lot of competition when you're a middle-aged woman for the asexual trophy. I mean, these young people think they've got a lock on it, but just you wait, you will. That will.
I got an email. I got an email a couple of years ago from somebody who I must have met, years back at like a play or a show or something like that. So I was on this newsletter list, and they were raising money for an independent film that they're doing. They were doing a feature film, a rom-com, where both love interests are asexual. And they were and I was thinking, like, you want to have some sexual chemistry for a romantic comedy. So the idea of having a romantic comedy with no sexual tension or chemistry just seemed like, oh, I don't want to see that, and I definitely don't want to pay money for it. I mean, maybe I would see it if I didn't have to pay for it, but
well, couldn't they still be romantic? I mean, in this world where I suppose the idea was to explode labels and blur the boundaries between categories, but instead it just turned into millions and millions of categories. But I think there's an aromantic category where I suppose you could still be sexual. And then there's an asexual category where I think you could still be romantic. But I haven't up.
Yeah, I don't know. For one, I think it's really odd that like LGBTQ now includes an A as well, like the asexuals, because I feel like if you take gay men and asexuals, it's like completely, different extremes. It's sort of like gay guys, get laid anytime that they want, anywhere, and want to get laid because, they're dudes. And then the asexuals, I guess not, they are what they are.
I just was thinking about like the glory hole in the asexual bathroom, or like
it's the cleanest glory hole ever.
And what goes on like in those sections in the woods,
Yeah.
like the cruising sections in the asexual park. And I just the undisturbed, pristine nature.
No STDs, no STDs whatsoever, or STIs, I guess they call it now.
I was just looking at, I wonder if, can I do this? Someone sent a screenshot, and it was from the fire. This is like live on camera, scrolling through my texts. From
I can't see him. Don't worry about it. I can't see him.
Yeah. I know. Thank God you can't actually see what is happening in these texts. So they looked at by I'll have to edit this out because it's so boring me. They looked at by like sexual identity, how much kids thought violence was an okay response to like protesting and people or ideas you didn't like. And I'm not finding it. I'm sure it's like right above where I am. But so the group that was the least prone to think that violence was an acceptable response were the asexuals. And then I was like, I wonder if they just have low affect generally. Like if they're just kind of like, I don't need sex. I don't really care that much about protesting or violence or Gaza or, and they're just kind of like maybe they're just kind of experiencing the whole world a little bit down here and nothing bothers them that much.
Yeah. I wonder how many of them are medicated too. Like, I wonder if that plays plays a part. If they're on like does lithium just take away your libido or?
I don't know. That's one of the few drugs I've never been on. I don't know, but isn't the story of lithium that there was a high lithium content in the water somewhere in Belgium? And is this a myth? And people were like very mellow.
They're very, very asexual during that time period. They had a problem breathing.
But I mean, isn't that part of how it was discovered that lithium, helped balance people's? I don't know where I heard that. So
I heard something about lithium that there's when you watch like a sunrise, the light does something in your brain that releases lithium. That might sound like the most bullshit thing, but I'm going to believe it anyway. That's going to be my it's like a dream catcher. Sort of.
Is there a lithium shortage now that people use it for batteries? And are there going to be more people with bipolar disorder eating batteries?
Eating batteries or just driving electric vehicles.
Yeah.
And they're gonna say, I can't believe why am I so depressed and unhappy and manic when I'm doing the right thing and driving an electric vehicle.
Yeah. They're like, it's just not going from the engine into my veins but if they could do that, if they could have a car, lithium battery powered car that also reduced like stress in the driver, that'd be good. Maybe we've solved road rage.
I think so. I think maybe we just came up with a, kind of like a futuristic, like a show idea.
Yeah. Yeah. Medicated by your cars.
Yeah. Like where the lighter is, you put in like a little like IV sort of thing.
Yeah. You stick a finger in there while you're. Yeah. Nice. Maybe get a little Ozempic too. So you're not eating, I eat a lot in the car. So
do you know with Ozempic, do you know anybody on who's used Ozempic? I've heard like some stories that the one person who I know who told me that she had done it, she was already like a thin person. And so I wasn't sure what she was trying to, how many ounces more she was trying to lose. You know?
Well, I recently stopped by a friend's house, which hardly ever happens in New York, but my husband and I were walking home, and it was our anniversary. So naturally we were looking for other people to hang out with, so we didn't have to, have a conversation. So we were walking by our friend's apartment, and we buzzed him, and we went inside, and I said, wow, you look really very slim. And he said, Ozempic. And he is a type 1 diabetic. So, and like a crazy food lover and food adventurer. So I said, well, what is it like to not be caring about food? And he said, no, I still care, and I still love food. I just don't need that much of it. And seemed so relaxed. And I just thought that seems awesome. Like I spend so much time trying not to eat, and then overeating, then feeling bad about eating. And you and I just recently met and went to dinner with some people, which was, and there was a sesame crusted feta cheese thing that was like the most delicious thing I ever ate. And I was like, it was very hard for me to not just really, really shovel it all. Like when there's food, I just want to push everyone away and just smash my face into it. So I like the idea of that. If you take Ozempic, like, you just don't think about it. I don't like the idea of any further sagging of my face. There's like plenty of that. And then what else happens to you? Do you become asexual?
A little asexual? Is that
like what happens?
I think you no longer desire to perform oral sex. Like you just the same.
I must be on Ozempic.
That with that night that we met, it was at a book event for Michael Shermer.
Yeah,
he had his which I think we could reveal.
Yeah.
He wants to sell some books.
Oh my God, it's Lou Perez.
So Michael Shermer has a new book out called Conspiracy, and it was an event where he was kind of doing a Q&A about it, and so that's where we met. Then afterwards there it goes. I don't know where mine is. I think mine is around here somewhere. We all got free copies of the book, and Michael was very very cool about it. And there was a celebrity spotting there. The notable Neil deGrasse Tyson was in attendance. He was a very large man. I'd never met him before, and he kind of had like a Crocodile Dundee hat on. I don't know if you remember that.
Mm. All I remember is that, and people told me this was these two things were not related, but he left right after I asked what were they talking about? Like the Happy Grove? What is this thing?
Oh, there was so at one point, because the book is about conspiracies, a question came up about Bohemian Grove.
Which
is like this like meeting of like all the elites come together in this like campground, I think in California. Yeah. And the conspiracy is that's where they can kind of control the world from, and they make all these make all these decisions. But in addition to that, I think that one of the questions came up of why is it that intelligent people fall for conspiracies? And Neil deGrasse Tyson, super intelligent guy, he had some things to say about that, basically calling other people stupid. I mean, that was kind of his way about it. And then you followed that up with a question or something.
My question was because they said that no women are allowed at Bohemian Grove. So I asked, if you identify as a man, could you go? Right. And but I was actually asking that. I really wanted to know, but it was not taken seriously. But he left soon after. And
I think I actually said, I think when we talked, I said he left because of you.
Yeah, but I really thought that, but maybe that was egotistical of me to think that I could unmoor Neil deGrasse Tyson. But he had Mr. Smarty Pants had recently. Where had he? Was it on? What's the podcast? The Constantine Kissing thing somewhere.
Yeah. He's talked so on a number of podcasts. So the latest one, he was on Trigonometry with Constantine and Francis, who are the hosts, and he was talking about gender being on a spectrum, et cetera. But he's come out even before that stuff. I remember years ago he was on with Ben Shapiro, and they were talking about transgenderism and stuff. And his thing, Mr. Science Guy, his thing was, why do you care? Why do you care how somebody identifies? Why do you care? And all this. And it's like, here's a guy who's a fucking astrophysicist. It's like, why do you care about floating rocks that are not going to have, any impact in your life now, in the here and now? He's also a guy, who he's become very open about gender and males competing with women in sports. He's very open about that and breaking down those barriers. But yet, if you claim that Pluto is a planet, he'll call you a moron and talk about how stupid you are and how dare you even fathom that. It's like, the balls on this guy.
Yeah, the space balls on that guy. I wonder how he came to accept that belief system. Mm-hmm. And I think for many of us, it just gets pummeled into us, or we're told. This is certainly what happened to me. Like, we're told that if we speak in these certain terms, like woman refers to females, that will be harming people, that trans kids will kill themselves, that we're marginalizing people. And I think as a proper liberal, I was sensitive to that. So even though I had this feeling of like, there's something wrong with this language, and there's something wrong with being told to look away. Very early on, I was like, people said, don't report about detransitioners. It's very rare and it just messes everything up. And I forgive myself for going along with it, because I was always a freelancer and I never had any institutional support. And I also didn't have any community support, because there weren't other people. Everyone around me had already drank the Kool-Aid. So it is very hard to pull yourself out of that. But it's all about training you not to trust your instincts and that feeling of like, this seems wrong. And once you start speaking that way, I think you've declared your acceptance for these ideas. So it's very hard to walk it back, So now he's all in, Neil deGrasse Tyson, and none of it makes sense the way, well, what he says about black holes makes sense. Now, I can't fact check what he says about black holes, so maybe he's full of shit about that too, and we just don't know. But he was doing the thing, when I heard him, it must have been on Trigonometry, saying, if a man wants to wear makeup, that's fine, and then he doesn't have to be a man. And just like, well, what does that have to do with it? The thing is like that this belief system is very based in a toddler's brain. And I was thinking about this earlier today. Not to just shut me up if I start blabbing gender.
No, keep going. I have a toddler, so hit me with it. Yeah.
So the way your toddler is going to understand male and female, right? They're gonna get to this cognitive phase around 2 or 3 years old of gender identity. And it's a kind of toddler preschooler cognitive phase in which they start to understand that there are men and women, girls and boys, and that they're in one category or the other. And the way they understand those categories is pretty much based on stereotypes. And young kids, especially girls, will work very hard to position themselves squarely in in the category by performing the stereotypes. And that's why there's like a hardcore princess phase starting around 3, and why kids that had played together as boys and girls, they start to separate around 3, and they're trying to do boy and do girl. And it takes years before they understand that what makes you a girl is not a princess dress, it's the body you have. So when we talk about gender identity like that, and when Neil deGrasse Tyson talks about gender identity like that, it's very much a toddler's understanding of the world. And then I was also thinking about the kind of compelled speech. Today I was thinking about, this is walking home from the cafe this morning, I was thinking about like the compelled speech of pronouns, and you must call me what I want to be called and see me how I want to be seen. And that was reminding me of this cognitive phase of theory of mind, which is a little bit later, I think, in a child's life, 6 or 7. And that's when, yesterday, I asked my 2-year-old downstairs neighbor who her teachers were at her preschool. And she was like, oh, it's Anne. And she rattles off the names as if I know these people, because she thinks that everybody knows what she does and understands the world the way she does. That if she knows these teachers, then her upstairs neighbor knows these teachers. But as you develop cognitively, you start to realize, oh, I see the world this way, but other people see the world differently. So what I think about all this like compelled speech and controlling the way people talk about you in the third person is, again, like a child's understanding that like you have to see the world and myself exactly as I do, and I have to control that. And I really think we just see all of these people everywhere in all these institutions behaving like toddlers. And I think that's what the training has been. It's like teach you to think and thus behave like a toddler. And I do sometimes behave like that, and I consider it a problem. That's like the difference between me and the other people acting that way. It's like I'm trying not to act that way. I've done all kinds of things to try to behave like an actual grown-up. I'm not saying they've worked, but
yeah,
how are the rest of you not trying to stop acting like this?
So I have 2 boys. One's 4 and one's 2.5. And
What do you think?
what's that?
I said, so you think?
Yeah,
Right,
sorry. And something that I've been thinking about is people talking about like socialization, and the idea that like that my wife and I are socializing them to be boys, to behave like boys, which I got to tell you is nothing further from the truth. The amount of times we ask them to stop doing boy shit, like beating the shit out of each other, wrestling, jumping around, breaking shit every single day, like from when they wake up to when they go to bed. And their wake ups have been, this week was like 4 a.m. at one point.
That's horrible.
It's like, no, there's something going on in them that makes them behave this way. And we're going to do our best to keep the positive stuff and, have them control themselves and all that. But there's a point where it's like, I can't control what's going on here. And I remember, I think it was Rob Henderson, who he has a new book out.
Yeah.
And he was talking about when it, like the idea of like social construction with gender stuff. And I'm interested what you have to say about this, where if a little girl, say, for example, is in a princess stage, people will look at that and say, well, that's a social construct. She wants, the whole wanting to be a princess. But if it's a little boy who's wants to be a princess in a princess stage, it's like, that's a little girl. That he is actually a little girl this whole time. And that kind of, simplicity, I think, is really, really dangerous and pretty stupid when it comes to children,
It's interesting, right? So if it's gender conformity, it's imposed upon them. If it's gender nonconformity, it's natural.
It's who they are. It's who they truly are.
Which is fascinating. But I think that what I just talked about with this theory of this cognitive stage of gender identity, and that's how I understand gender identity. So that's obviously not how people are being taught about gender identity now, but They're being taught that it's this innate thing and that it's innate in all of us. Whereas I don't think that's what it is. I think it's an awareness of sex. And some people will be really upset about that. Mm-hmm. Most of us don't care, but probably a lot of us experience some kind of discomfort or shame about our bodies because of sex stereotypes, which are, again, like, a good way to control people. And so I think when a girl is going through a princess phase, in some cultures, that would be the princess is what's associated with high femininity. So they're just doing whatever they need to do to communicate girl. And if we said, like, a girl wears like blue and thorns and whatever, they would probably do that. So what's innate, I think, is to belong to your tribe, whatever that is. But I think what's associated with that tribe, some of that is culturally constructed. The rough and tumble play that you're seeing your little boys do, that tends not to be. That does seem to be one of the things that's very different between boys and girls. But then there are plenty of things. There's plenty of overlap in the boy typical and the girl typical, and then there are the extremes. And I think because of like my hardcore feminist rearing, I was very resistant to the idea of innate gendered behavior. And also, I think I had a single mom and I was like not very feminine. Like, I mean, loud, aggressive. I mean, I think I was later on, I went to Israel once and they told me I'd fit right in and I was really offended, but I think maybe like I had no like Jewish cultural training, but I think if I had and I'd grown up in like among Jews like that, maybe I would have just been normal, but I was weird because anyway, so between my own experience and this very particular training of the way to see the world, I resisted some of those messages about innate gendered behaviors. And then I also did a ton of research about what's considered masculine or feminine in different times and found things like a common saying in the 19th century, classics are for gentlemen, science is for ladies. Like that our idea of what boys are good at and girls are good at, some of them change. And we used to think, women couldn't be doctors and they couldn't be lawyers and they couldn't do math. And so I think the resistance from people like me is because to those ideas is because we saw how they were wielded to, oppress women. But then there becomes too much resistance that becomes men. There are no average differences between men and women, which obviously created an opening for people to take that to such an extent that you have males competing against females in sports, as if when you declare yourself to be something else, you actually are. This like magical power of language that we have in this weird era, social media era.
Yeah, they're like spells. Yeah, like sort of like there's spells, and I've heard some people point out where that's kind of how it is in academia, where for a lot of academics, they don't actually have to make anything. They don't actually have to like take an idea, build something, and see if it fails or succeeds. So a lot of the stuff that they're talking about is sort of like these abstract things, like how you talked about, in college, like all the looking at stuff through a neo-Marxist lens, and it's like, well, what does that even fucking mean? Like you don't like you're viewing something and deconstructing it or just describing how you're viewing it through this framework rather than like having to rather than saying, oh, we're going to build a cabin through a neo-Marxist lens. It's like, all right, well then let's see that cabin. Like we need to see what that, what the thing actually
We're going to sit on a pile of sticks.
Right.
I think one of the I mean, I'm still working all this out, but we have so many more human beings on the planet and so many more human beings in America. And we have elites deciding what's right. And I think one of the worst ideas in the past couple of decades is that everybody needs a college education, because then you have fewer and fewer, and that happens, as we lose industry. So we just like, what are you, when the Republicans started making fun, I don't remember when it was, but at some point they started making fun of art history degrees. I mean, maybe my disenchantment with my own people has been going on longer than I thought, but I remember thinking like, yeah, what is that for? And I think it's wonderful to study art history. I think the history of art is incredible. I think it's, from cave paintings on, this has been an important way for humans to express themselves and differentiate themselves from other species. And I think that's all really interesting. But at the end of the day, if you don't have a trust fund, you have to get a job. And so at some point I realized, ultimately my degree, if you can call it that, from Hampshire College was experimental feminist video.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Okay. Please go on. I need to hear more about this.
And then I arrived in New York and was like, well, I don't know how to do anything because I was trained by people who went to film school and then rejected that. And then they were teaching us their rejections. And I was like, shit, I should have gone to like regular film school where somebody could have taught me a trade, and then I could get work and I could still try to be some kind of artist. So, in the end, it was fine because I worked my way up to, I worked at Blue's Clues and I made Steve's notebooks, I found something to do. I found something to do, but I felt like my brain was rotting. I didn't realize till much later that was a plum job, but I wasn't using my brain in the way I wanted to use my brain, because like spray painting the coils of Steve's notebook was just, also I wasn't that good at it. So, and I wanted to write, but yeah, I was not prepared for anything. And actually I first went to graduate school for environmental psychology because I was very, very obsessed about the relationship between the built environment and community. And I was obsessed with utopias, and I was obsessed with like towns where people walked by or they had porches, or just versus suburbia, which felt so lonely. And I met this guy in a bar, Marie Price's Cafe in the West Village, and he ran this environmental psychology program. And I was like, yeah, that's awesome. I'm coming to your program. And I got in and I went to the first day and they handed out the packet of reading. And I was like, oh, this is basically experimental feminist video through a neo-Marxist lens. And I just kept saying, like, what's the job when I get out of here?
Yeah.
And they said consulting. And I was like, okay, I can't do this. I dropped out and got an MFA. But anyway, I just think this idea that we should all be trained in this kind of critical thinking that is not practical and not geared. I reject it now. And I think we are due for some kind of class revolution and strengthening vocational education and just trying to help people have a decent quality of life. And I find these, speaking of Rob Henderson, the luxury beliefs about language, that thinking that language manifests change, that pronouns manifest massive social change. Like, it's all so up here, and it's
it's almost like
a log cabin.
Yeah. With college education, I went to NYU. I have a BA in, I guess, the humanities, and then I have an MFA from City College in creative writing. And one of the best things that happened to me is that I didn't get into any other graduate programs other than City College. Because had I got into Columbia, had I got into NYU, I would have been in massive debt. And, the fact was, me being a fiction writer didn't get me, it wasn't getting me paid. But I think like, it's sort of like as academia, as like college has expanded, where it's like everybody goes to college, they've also tried to keep it where it's almost like academics are a priestly class. Like where, like they're all, studying the Talmud, and it's like, you're not actually doing that. You're studying a lot of abstract stuff that for a lot of people that doesn't actually create that much value. And now I think with the internet and social media, it's like they are no longer safe from criticism from just like normal people. Like, you describe like an experimental feminist video, like that's a punchline that people will bring up, right? And it's like, it's like other people who are, still in that, they're not safe from people pointing out like, what the fuck are you going to do with that? Like, what do you, especially today. So I don't see how much longer, the traditional college can last. And by traditional, like the way college has been the last 20, 30 years, if we keep at it.
Also, it's like $90,000.
Yeah, it's insane.
And you're being taught by impoverished adjuncts.
Yeah.
The whole thing. I mean, I think that when my father-in-law was a professor of history, he passed away a couple of years ago, but I just think you could have a pretty good life and a real middle-class life. And that was an option. You could own a house and raise your kids. And I just don't think that's a thing anymore, which is too bad because it seemed like a great life. But I also think, I'm thinking about Frank Lloyd Wright's school, Taliesin. I went, I stupidly, this is my education. CUNY for environmental psychology for one semester. I was like, fuck this. There's no job. I transferred to urban planning. They thought I was crazy because that's basically a trade, right? I was giving up the highbrow academia for get trained in actual skills. That was, for the most part, deathly boring, except for an architecture class and the law class, land use law. I was one of the only people that liked it. I was like, the definition of public nuisance is fascinating. And I, maybe I should have gone that route because now I'd have, because I'd be a lawyer and I'd have money in my retirement fund. But while I was doing that, my older brother, who is an artist, said, I don't understand why you're trying plan B when you want to be a writer. Why didn't you try plan A? And I was like, okay. So he told me to take some writing classes with his friend. I'm never going to remember this guy's name, but he lived in an $82 apartment, $82 a month. And he was kind of like from the language poet scene and the leftover from the Frank O'Hara days. I wish I could remember his name. So he would work with me like, you can only use the vowel I for this entire page. That was the kind of like thing I was doing with him. Like avant-garde shit. And I was like, I think I'm actually fair. I just want to tell a story. It turned out that just like the great secret of writing is you say this happened and then this happened and people pay attention. But I had no like writing or publishing experience. And then I read the Best American Short Stories, whatever year this was, in the 90s, end of the 90s. And there was a story called, it was called My Father the Genius or something like that, or My Brother the Genius by Ron Carlson. And I flipped to the back of the book and it said, he teaches at Arizona State. So I wrote him a letter and asked if he would teach me how to do what he did. And I went out to Arizona. And this story had a purpose, but now I can't remember what it was. But it had to.
Well, your brother said, why are you choosing Plan B when you really want to do?
What did you say right before you told your story about graduate school? And anyway, I can't remember. But
there's no way I'll remember. I don't. I'm a goldfish.
No, I'm a goldfish too because I'm older. Yeah. But
you are doing it, and I mean you are doing it, and you've done it, successfully, except for those 2 books that were the worst sellers.
No, they're all 4 are worst sellers, but the one I'm writing now is going to do very well.
Are you allowed to say what the title is or what it's about?
It's called Untitled Nonfiction Project.
And it just uses the letter I.
I had a title for it, but I actually don't have a say over the title, which is too bad because I love my title, but I'm not going to say what it is. But the subtitle, according to me, is the story of the gender culture war. And it's basically like how we got here, where the ideas came from, who were the people meeting in the random places. But I really wish I could remember why I was telling you a story about Arizona. But
I'll tell you, I don't know. I don't. You probably don't have a cover yet, but I think having an asexual glory hole as the cover would be absolutely fantastic.
Well, that either needs to be the name of like an album or a band or an art exhibit. Asexual glory holes.
Yeah.
Something. We got to use that for something.
Yeah. Now I'm trying to think like what happens on the, with an asexual glory, like what do you even put in there?
Just flowers.
Just flowers. I feel like you go to like an asexual glory hole, like you go down and then you look through and then the other person on the other end, and you both tell each other, we're very interesting. That's it.
Yeah. Are they very interesting? I think what's weird about going back to that, it's just all these very, very young people calling themselves that. And what they mean is they're pre-sexual.
I have a friend of mine. He's around 60. He's gay. And he has a friend, he has a young friend. She's like, I think she just graduated college. She's like 22 and she's queer. And all of her friends are different versions of queer, and he's talking, he talks to her about what dating is like. And dating is awful for her. And he doesn't think that she's had sex before. So she's queer. Her friends are queer. None of them have sex. That now doesn't necessarily mean that they're asexual. They're whatever identifier they are, they're not, enacting that. It's like if you're like back in the day, if you were bisexual, it's like you have sex with men, you have sex with women, you're probably dating, or have dated, men or women. Now people don't it's like all they have is the identifier without actually having the fun of being whatever the fuck it is that they say they are. And my friend, he's like, Lou, you're a straight guy and I'm a gay man and my, 6-year-old gay man. I have more in common with you than I do with these young queer kids. It's like we're able to talk about, sex and relationships and stuff like that. These kids are like it's completely alien to them.
Well, I also think it's bad to either be straight or gay because it's not trans inclusive,
right.
Bisexual. I mean, all of it is bad and oppressor. Ben was at dinner, right? Ben Appel was at dinner with us, I think.
Yeah.
And
he's great. That's really great.
He's working on this memoir that he calls Cis White Gay. That's about like his discovering, what had happened to activism. And anyway, when his book comes out, you should talk to him about his book.
Sorry, Lisa, something weird just happened. So on screen, a couple of bubbles came up and a thumbs up. So I don't know what that. Yeah, does that mean? Yeah. Whoa! Look at that! I got fireworks now.
Yeah.
That's
my children taught me this.
Oh wow! You have a filter on.
No, don't you have it on?
No, you're the You're the oddball here with a filter on. I mean, I like it.
Even on, we're not even on Chrome.
Are you using your phone?
No, I'm on my computer. I mean, we're on Chrome. Sorry, we're not on Zoom.
So weird. Yeah.
The Zoom thing.
I like it, you know. So.
Wait, have you tried? Did you try going like this?
Let's see. Whoa, no way.
You have magic powers.
This whole time I've been the magic that I seek.
Yeah.
Wow. Let's see what I do. I'm putting up a peace sign.
Yeah.
No, they don't like peace. They just like thumbs up and yeah.
Oh no. Do peace again. Do it next to your head.
Okay.
Do it further back. Do it like. Isn't that what I did? Yeah. No peace for you.
It works for you, but the people listening to this are so intrigued right now that they're like, Lou and Lisa are hallucinating.
Well, when I was on the Heterodox podcast and we kept talking about radio stripping, I was like, oh yeah, that's exactly the kind of porn I would do.
Yeah,
like, no pictures.
Howard Stern back in the day. Well, why don't we talk about that? Like, being heterodox and wrong think, and what that means, and what impact that's had on your world and your friendships and social circles and all that.
Okay, first I want to tell you that I do want to talk about that. I remembered why I was bringing up Arizona State, where I got my MFA. And that's because they had Frank Lloyd Wright's school was there. He has two, one in, I think, Wisconsin, and then Taliesin West in Arizona. And I loved it there. It was so cool. And again, I was obsessed with architecture and urban planning and community. But at the school, for instance, like everyone had to learn to play an instrument and perform. You had to build your own shelter. You had to listen to good music. It was very much about sort of appreciating the finer things and working that into your vision for architecture or whatever you were going to do with your life. And I always imagined that when I had kids that I would send them there. And who knows, my kids are 12 and 14. Maybe they will end up there. And I also realized that I had this bad education where I was getting like the regurgitated actions to classical education and not well educated myself, which is why I didn't know anything about the Alexander and the book burning or whatever, and why I can only do half of the Thursday New York Times crossword puzzle because I'm poorly educated in hippie reactionary education. But I really actually like the idea of a Taliesin kind of version of education in which your whole person is educated. So in some ways, I think the idea of like going off to college and having these experiences and learning to see the world, like all of that could be really good. And I don't think that if you go to technical school and learn plumbing, there's any reason you should have some of that too. I just feel like the elitism folding in on itself and recycled and regurgitated, and then nobody knows any facts, and there are no facts, and the postmodern influence just has ended up leading to this stupid society that we're in now. And that actually does lead to the heterodoxy, because I would still, I assumed that like most people in my cohort, if it's in the New York Times, it's correct. And, living in this area, I assume it's where we're going. When people say I read something in the paper, they mean the New York Times. And I think up through the 90s, there was also still some amount of monoculture. Like everybody, like the last episode of Seinfeld was a community event. Before that, it was the last episode of Match. But like, you were able to have like a lot more in common with people. And I'm sure this started with whatever the ruling was that allowed Fox to separate it, allowed these news to be partisan. which I'm forgetting all about how that happened. But, and then the growth of streaming, and all of these things, social media, that instead of bringing us together, allowed these smaller and smaller groups to come together and then have outsized power, even though they're a tiny little minority. And all of this was happening, I guess, as I, had kids. Which I had my kids late, because it took a long time to find someone to do it with, or like someone to tolerate me enough, someone good enough who would also tolerate me.
We're just going to edit it. We're just going to say good enough.
Yeah. So, because I'm a lot. So I was, still kind of trusting that liberal equaled right. And it was really the combination. It was the combination of having a kid who was, I had this daughter, and by age 2, she was just, I have this picture of her, and she's in a princess dress at daycare, and she looks like a drag queen. Like, she's just like, she's muscular, and she was my first kid. So I didn't know that that the way she behaved was unusual, and like hanging off things and maybe acting more like your sons, like muscular. She's like a muscular toddler, and so as she was growing up, there were two things happening. One was the rise of the notion of the trans kid, getting more and more embedded in our popular culture and then in our institutions, and more people having a real disconnect when they saw my kid, and really needing to fit her into this new trans box. So the idea of like, we're eroding boundaries, we're creating all these boundaries, it didn't work. It didn't work for actual gender nonconforming children. It would still disturb people that there was like a short-haired masculine girl who played baseball and hung out with all boys. Whereas when I was growing up, we had a name for that kind of kid. And we also had a tacit acknowledgement that such a kid, a super feminine boy or a super masculine girl, we're all like, kid's probably going to be gay. And it was no big deal. And I mean, this is how I ended up writing this book, Tomboy, about the history, science, and psychology of masculine girls. That was happening. And I was just like, seems weird. And I wrote an op-ed for the Times in 2017 that they called My Daughter Is Not Transgender, She's a Tomboy, but I called it My Daughter Is a Girl, Really. And it was kind of like, yeah, trans kids, that's fine, but like, why is it about stereotypes? And I didn't know anything about the cultural war or censoriousness around this. And the other thing that happened was the white privilege book, in which I was, we had a diversity book club at the elementary school, and I had joined it because I wanted to create some room for kids like mine, not in a really imposing it way, but just to kind of like, there are kids like this, and they don't need much. You just kind of like tell people, I swear to God, she's a girl. I know it looks weird, but some girls are like that. And then that's it. Right. But we had the book club, and I couldn't finish the book. It was unbearable.
Is that Robin?
Robin. And I also thought it was so strange to decide what people could say or feel or how they behave based on skin color. It seemed really regressive to me. It almost seemed like the next version of, the way I was trained by people reacting to what they'd learned. And then this was some kind of, this person had some experiences and was reacting to them and then teaching me to have her reaction. And I went to the book club thinking, well, we're going to parse this. Like, we're going to critique it. It's book. I guess I thought that's what book club was, but it was full struggle session of people talking about when they'd been racist and how they'd been racist and how they could do better. And like people of South Asian descent saying like, yeah, I think I have some anti-Blackness that I need to work through. And I don't deny the reality of racism. And I think tribalism is a very, very, very human instinct. And it's one we can be aware of and, try not to embed in law and policy as much as possible. But it seemed so weird that we weren't going to critique this idea that the idea that I, as a white person, should face the worst parts of myself and then not be allowed to cry about it.
Mm.
It was so incredibly inhuman. And and then people were like, yeah, but you can't say anything. Can't say anything right now. And I was like, but my whole way of being in the world has always been to say the thing that other people think and don't say, not on purpose, not to be a rabble rouser, but as a compulsion. So then I had to tamp down the most, again, my most basic instinct. So everything around me was teaching me to not be me. And I was like, wait, I already feel horribly ashamed of myself all the time. I've already been trained to feel shame about how I look and be I'm trying to go in the opposite direction where I accept myself. And because that's what you're supposed to do when that's the Shangri-La you're supposed to arrive at as a middle-aged lady is I don't give a fuck land, So I was like, I don't want to tamp down my objections. And didn't I become a writer so I could say sort of speak some kind of truth? I don't know. It just was so anathema to my entire way of being in the world. And at the same time, I understood, it's uncomfortable and you can grow through discomfort. And I got the arguments, but it just seemed like people like me were going to the struggle sessions so that they could bow down to this ideology, but still keep jobs, and not make any change. I just hate it.
Yeah, and I think it's also sort of like the golden rule on steroids, where it's if somebody believes that they have the original sin of white privilege and all that, and they want to bow at the altar and they want to give penance and all that, it's okay, that's your fucking sin. But it doesn't mean that every single white woman needs to join your religion and join your faith, and especially if you're a person with self-respect. And that's what I find so funny. It's the target audience for the Sarah, was it Rao's, the race to dinner and all that.
Yeah.
It's I guess there's an audience out there who wants to have dinner with these disgusting women and, to be shat on the whole time that they're at dinner. Okay. But the women that I hang out with, nope, that's not who they are,
Actually, it would be fascinating to go to that. I mean, I think it's very, very easy to manipulate white women. I think that, look, historically, you could control Black women because they had absolutely no power of any kind. But when white women got some power, they got the right to vote, they didn't want, they did screw over Black women by not helping them get the right to vote. But so it was, as especially white women gained more rights, the easiest way to control them. Look, is this just my history talking? I still believe this shit, but it's through shame. So for instance, a good example of this is the women's dress reform movement. So until then, women of a certain kind of woman was wearing a corset and a crinoline and 25 pounds of constrictive clothing. That
sounds like CrossFit now it's that's exercise.
So that really did help to control them, right? And then you have the dress reform movement, and you have bloomers, and you can take this stuff off. But the next big craze is the flapper movement, in which like the ideal body, so it goes from your ideal body is like big bosom, tiny waist, big hips, big bottom. Bring in the thong song. So, by the way, anyway, I don't want to talk about things, but
you don't want to talk about my wedding song, the thong song.
But it goes from that's the ideal body to the flapper. And in order to look good in a flapper dress, you essentially need to have a boy's body with no hips, no boobs, and you start having to starve yourself. And that's the advent of the consumer scale and weighing yourself and diet culture. So, you don't need laws to shame these women into behaving into certain ways. There's consumer culture, and there's the rise of magazine culture. There's all this stuff happening at the same time. So I think that stuff is real. I think what's happened now is you can control anybody through shame, because now men, shave their chests, and they also want to look like they haven't gone through puberty, except with huge muscles. So maybe it's a slightly different and contradictory set of norms for men.
Yeah, I'm trying. Yeah, with ladies' fashion and now like with the men's stuff. Yeah, I wonder how much can be blamed on gay men for that. Like, I'm going to talk to Ben about that. Be like, Ben, how much, are you responsible for this shit? You're responsible for telling women that they need to be, this thin and they need to look a certain way, or whoever the fuck told women to put on those fake eyelashes that are like an inch thick and, really thick. And now it's like, yeah, like, men like needing to look like like twinks. And I think I'm suffering from it. Like I count my calories now. I get my, close to 200 grams of protein a day. And, I wonder, now it's time to bring up Michael Shermer's book. Is there a big gay conspiracy to, turn, I don't know.
It was discovered as a demographic. When did I guess after AIDS, right? Then it became a demographic. Like they were visible, they were organized, two men, like a gay male couple will tend to have more money than any other couple, because men still tend to make more than women. So I remember, was it in the 90s where there was like that Volkswagen commercial, two guys driving around and they see some cool like mid-century couch, and they stop and they can fit it in their little Volkswagen Beetle or something. And it was sort of like, oh, they are marketing stuff toward gay men. And I think that was a big deal. I think
it's my uncle, the Bachelor, with his buddy Brad.
Right. And I think that's also what happened in the past couple of years with these corporations embracing all things pride, is thinking like, yeah, this helps us sell shit and legitimizes us. And I think it's starting to turn around now, I think.
Well, yeah,
yeah.
I think like with the heterodox stuff and the wrong thing.
Yeah, that's what we were talking about.
Yeah, I think it's coming around where, I'm happy that, that you stuck to your guns into who you are, and by, calling out and asking and questioning, a lot of this stuff. Because I do think it's over the past few years, there are a lot of people who have wanted to speak out but didn't feel comfortable about, doing it. But now when they see it, it's like, oh no, now I could actually speak out and say what I think without as much fear of retribution as before.
I mean, what's really strange about this time is like, it's not, technically we have free speech and you can say what you want, and, you can say trans women are women, or trans women are trans women, and you won't be arrested. But the censoring is coming from the culture, and we're doing it to each other. And this is one of the arguments about the massive change that wrought by social media, in that if a company wants to sell me something, and by the way, I think there are some amazing middle-aged lady products out there now. Like they make special makeup for middle-aged ladies, and they make like, I don't know. It's just, I'm kind of like, yeah, great, bring it on. They figured out middle-aged ladies were a demographic too, and that we feel physically and mentally horrible, and they can, instead of like selling us Valium or whatever we would have gotten, like they can just sell us products. We'll buy anything trying to feel better. So, but I think this, the promise is there that like we can, well, I guess I'm talking about like speaking up, but as I think that the way social media works is that instead of shaming us, if a company shames us into buying a product, I'm getting my train of thought back. What social media does is puts us in that kind of driver's seat, and we shame each other, and they make money off it. And that's really, really different. Like we do the dirty work. You know, we make the content on Instagram. They just have to provide the platform. And you know, they don't even have to make fucking content because they'll get all of us doing all this work for free, like trying to get followers. And the worse we behave, the more of a spectacle we make of ourselves, the more followers, the more engagement. And I think that's been very, very bad for humankind. And it's also made it so much harder to speak up, because you're not just going to get called to the principal's office and you get in a little trouble, and it's public, it's permanent, and it's a mob. Mm-hmm. And even it's a mob made up of anonymous people, it feels like a mob, and it leads to real consequences now.
Yeah. And also, you've provided your own, paper trail I mean, when I think of, I just had a video on YouTube that turned 15 years old, and it's like the most popular sketch I've ever produced with my comedy partner Greg. So that turned 15. I think we started putting stuff on YouTube like 17 years ago. And if I take that, Facebook and Twitter, I'm a little late. I was a little late to Instagram. But just that stuff alone, like there's so much stuff that I don't remember putting out. And even if I look back, I'm like, oh dude, what the fuck were you thinking? And I don't think I have time to, go back and cull it and erase the stuff that's particularly embarrassing without just nuking every single social media handle that I have.
Is it embarrassing because it's inappropriate or because it's woke?
Oh no! Oh no! Or it would be very anti-woke.
Very anti-woke before it was.
Yeah, and some things too. Like there's old stuff. I think one thing that we can't, that needs to be, said is that as we get older, we change, in some respects, and there are things that I would no longer be comfortable really joking about now that I would joke about before. Like now that I have kids, like there are probably like pedophile jokes that I would have told in my early 20s that would just kind of mess me up now. Like, I saw Quentin Tarantino's Once Upon a Time in Hollywood in the theater when it came out, and my wife was pregnant, and I did not enjoy that movie because I know the real story. I know the story that is based on the Sharon Tate, the murders, Manson murders. And even though it completely flipped the script and gave us an alternate universe where she is not murdered, and the Manson kids face horrible ends, I was still unable to enjoy that movie because of where I was. Had I seen it 10 years before, oh man, I would have loved every second of it. So in that respect, there's also people that I've worked with who, 15 years ago, I know that they were cool with this stuff, Whereas today they're not cool with it. And it's not even, it might not necessarily be like they're not cool with it because, they're afraid of, being, castigated, by the mob. It could be that they honestly don't agree with that anymore. And yet it still lives on. It's out there. So if I'm like resharing stuff, there's a part of me that's like, well, I might be embarrassed about this, but I'm still okay to reshare it. But am I fucking someone over who was in it and wants it to be, sort of left in the past,
Well, I wonder if we're moving a little bit past that because of that. Look, I'd never even heard of this guy or this thing that happened, but the SNL guy, Shane or Sean or somebody, there was some guy who he had been hired by SNL.
And Shane Gillis. Yeah.
They discovered, I don't know, a semi.
He said the word chink, I believe, and not as a chink in one's armor on a podcast. I think he was describing like Chinatown or something like that. And he was hired and lost his job. He was hired and fired before even his first day, and then he came around years later and hosted, which I think is definitely like a huge. I think that's a huge sign of where we are in the times.
Last night I like the show Hacks on HBO. I mean, I guess I like it somewhat. I like Jean Smart. It's about an aging stand-up.
I've heard about it, yeah.
It's pretty good. I mean, it's certainly good for like I'm incredibly exhausted and I need to stare at a TV for a minute. And there's a scene, spoiler alert. Anyway, Jean Smart is like finally accepted into like hanging out with these old dude comedians, making all kinds of inappropriate jokes. And then they make some kind of like bisexual joke and she gets offended on behalf of her, the other woman who stars in the show with her. And I was just like, well, it's not, you ruined it, and she complains about it. She says like, you ruined my night. I couldn't just go with it. But it's like, we should be able to make fun of these, of most things. And that's really the problem is that woke is not funny. And thank God there's still South Park. I mean, I think maybe children should, or teenagers and tweens should watch South Park so they learn to make fun of everything equally. Like that's real equality right there, is everything that can be like lampooned is lampooned, even though it's, I mean, sometimes it's so harsh, it's not. But I think what's happening is the market is coming around. I think you can see that by like Netflix employees who I'm sure are making very good money may walk out, but they keep putting Dave Chappelle on,
right,
and Ricky Gervais, and those specials do well. And the more verboten you make all this stuff, I suppose the more of an appetite there is for it. So they're going to, I think for a little while, there was this kind of break in capitalism, or, where it seemed like all these corporations were kind of like, oh, we better do this. Not just because it's good for business, but it's the right thing to do. And I think you saw that after, the introduction of the bathroom bills in 2016, like North Carolina introduced a bathroom bill, and like the NCAA or whatever, all these places said, oh, we're not going to have our games there. We're not going to do business there. And so market forces pushed us toward woke. And then you had, you go to the bank in June and then the ATM says Happy Pride. Like it became so deeply institutionalized. And then I think that started to, I think we reached the peak and started down again after the Dylan Mulvaney Bud Light thing, which was like, no, this is over. Like, stop. So I think the market is correcting for a little bit, but I also think like you can market to middle-aged ladies and you can market to gay guys, and you can see all these people as a demographic. But how do you market to heterodox people? Because in theory, all we have in common is we hate the idea that there's only one way to look at complicated issues, and we don't like censorship, and we want to make fun of shit. So, or we want to laugh.
Yeah.
Anyway. And it's like an almost impossible project because
something that I found is like when we had that dinner after the book event, I'd never broken bread with you guys before. A lot of it was the first time I was meeting everyone, and we talked about definitely stuff that we agreed on. And then, I think there was maybe like a few issues that maybe came up that there was like some, slight disagreement or whatever. But it was like, I don't give a shit. I'm having a really great time over dinner over this amazing, it was Greek food. So everything had something with feta in it. It was fantastic.
It was so delicious. When we walked in there, I looked at the menu and I was like, this is so fucking expensive. I was mad at first. But then it was so delicious that I was like, I can't wait to go back there.
Yeah, but all that to be said, I think one of the strains of the characteristics of being heterodox is that you're able to disagree with people and still enjoy their company and want to hang out with them again and do it again. And I think there's a real value in that, obviously to keep that going, because otherwise you become somebody, the idea, I think some people will, keep their opinions to themselves because they're just tired of arguing and they just don't want to get into an argument. And so it's like, let me just shut up because this person is just going to, come at me. And it's like, I just want to enjoy. I don't get to come to the city often. I don't get to go out to dinner often, especially with just adults. I just want to enjoy myself, So if you're a person who's just like super combative in every single, social, environment, after a while, people are not going to want to hang. So.
Yeah. I mean, I will say, I think in this heterodox world, what people respect is you defending your argument. So they're okay disagreeing with you, but I tend to not be that good at like in the moment defending my idea. So if someone is really pushing back hard, and it's, I would say like most of that world is pretty anti-feminist, and that particular lens I bring, people just think it's a kind of a stupid way to filter the world. But whatever, I'm allowed in. But I do find I don't have that skill yet of enjoying arguing. And like,
I have friends of mine, they love that. Like they are all about debate and arguing and all that. And I'm still somebody who, especially in the moment, and if I don't have time to prepare something or write it out, I get like I'm like, when's the punch going to be thrown?
Yeah.
And it's something that I have to, it's one of my failings that I need to work on.
But you did a debate, right? With
Michael Ian Black. Yeah.
Oh yeah. Right.
Yeah. Which was fun. That was enjoyable. I think comedy won that night.
Oh. Well, that's what's important.
Yeah.
It's comedy winning.
Yeah. Well, Lisa, I've held you for a while. I've really enjoyed our conversation. You have a new untitled book that's coming out, but
that's not coming out for like a really long time.
So forget about that. But you have Housewife that's out right now, right? It was just recently released.
Yes, and I have been. The last thing I'll say about the heterodox world is that if you stray, then you will be evaluated not based on what you write, but based on your heresy. And any like review in any mainstream publication or writing about you will begin with this person has bad ideas, wrong and bad. And so I found some hilarious. I found that it hasn't gotten a lot of attention, but in more conservative publications, it's more accepted because I think it's like completely fine to be a stay-at-home mom or even a trad wife. I defend trad wives, so I'm a heretic now for that. And going back to that thing about like having it be okay to disagree. Yeah, I have not. I'm totally fine with like sitting at dinner with someone who's conservative and is like anti-abortion because it's all out on the table and we know we disagree and we don't judge each other's entire character based on it. So the question for me is how to feel that way about my own people and also how to find humor in the humorless woke sphere in which I live.
There we go. If for the viewers out there and the listeners, if you have ideas about that, please let us know in the comments.
They're going to say THC soda, I think.
THC, no, lithium. We're going to get the lithium battery. Stuck on a lithium battery. We're going to go back. Oh, and Lisa, you're on Substack too, so people should definitely.
Oh yeah.
And I'll have links to all that stuff in the description. Awesome. So I'm gonna end the recording.